So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining today's event. This event today is part of our Regional Climate Collaborative Lunch and Learn series. And today we're super lucky to be hosting Environmental Resilience Institute based with Indiana University and a local government that has worked with them, Zionsville, Indiana. And what we'll be talking about today is building local capacity for governments so that they can kickstart and accelerate climate action in their jurisdictions. So before I hand it off to our guests, I wanted to provide a bit of background on the climate policy impact area at Green Umbrella. This is a new body of work within the past year, and what it focuses on is similar to what I had just said, kickstarting and accelerating climate action in the 10-county region in Greater Cincinnati. And so we have 4 goals, and to kick off those goals, they hired me, Savannah Sullivan, the Climate Policy Director here at Green Umbrella, and we've worked hard this past year to begin enhancing regional coordination, so bringing together local governments, communities, resident leaders to begin identifying what are climate issues in our area and what are some potential solutions. I'm going to talk in a couple of slides about some of the steps we're taking to that end. We also have work dedicated to centering equity in climate planning processes in Greater Cincinnati, and a future webinar will be dedicated to equity and community engagement, so stay tuned for that. We also work to build political will and engage elected officials so that climate and equity can become part of what they run on as they pursue office, whether it's for mayor, county commissioner, state rep, state senate. Last year, we did facilitate programming for the Cincinnati local elections. This year, we will be hosting programming for county and state elections in our region. So again, stay tuned for that. We'll be announcing that this year too. But today, we're really excited to talk about building local capacity. And so what do I mean when I say local capacity? That means not only the awareness and understanding of climate action in local government, what do staff, what do electeds need to do to be able to begin taking steps, whether it's a first step with creating a program, all the way to a big step of creating a jurisdiction-wide plan. And so before I dig in on a bit more of what local capacity can look like, I did want to bring it back to talking about regional coordination and how what we're talking about today connects to the goals that we are working with counties on. And today we are excited to share about our Regional Climate Collaborative launch that will be happening later this summer. So a Regional Climate Collaborative is a network that brings together partners, whether it be government partners, local NGO partners, resident leadership, to build awareness of what climate impacts are in the region, but to also work towards developing resources. And that can mean actually hiring more staff into governments and organizations to get this work done. That can look like collaboratively applying for grants together to implement programs or projects. And there is a lot of work and research already done on regional climate collaboratives. It is a mechanism that has been in place for over a decade now. And you'll see here on this map, there are several already in place. A great Midwestern example is the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, the Greenest Region Compact here in Greater Chicago. They've already engaged over 130 local governments in their region to develop climate action plans, to begin taking action and delivering capacity through fellowships and staff to help those governments and their local partners get that work done. And so I'll talk a little bit more at the end of the presentation on next steps for the collaborative. But today's focus is what steps are we taking here locally to begin building that local capacity further. And we're super fortunate to have the Environmental Resilience Institute in the Midwest. They are based out of Indiana University, and they will be talking a bit about how their programming, not only to deliver physical capacity through fellowships and technical assistance to local governments, has accelerated resilience action across the state of Indiana, but also some of the tools that they offer that are applicable to Midwestern governments across the whole region. And we'll have a fun announcement for how some of these resources and capacity opportunities will be coming to Ohio and Kentucky. Be talking about that at the end of the presentation. And I also wanted to highlight some other ways that our climate policy program is connecting with local governments as we work towards expanding ERI's programs outside of Indiana. We are working and connecting directly with local governments that are ready to take action now. And I wanted to call out and highlight two jurisdictions. One, Colerain Township. They spent time this past year developing the Team Up to Green Up model, which is a cross-sector collaborative group in partnership from their township government and their chamber to work on initiatives across their entire township. And they are already committing over $60,000 worth of trees to Colerain, as well as they've launched a waste program, an Adopt a Block program, where businesses and residents have signed up to address waste in Colerain. And we've also worked directly with Hamilton County Public Health to integrate climate and emergency preparedness into their We Thrive program, which works directly with local jurisdictions across the county to mobilize residents and local government policies to address health issues that the county and cities care about most. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Matt Flaherty. He's the Resilience Implementation Manager at the Environmental Resilience Institute, and he oversees the programming dedicated to not only fellowship programs that support local governments, but databases, toolkits. He'll tell you all about it. And fun story, Matt and I were in grad school together, so it's great to be able to see and work with him after graduation. And we are also fortunate to have Carol Johnson, the Executive Assistant to the Mayor of Zionsville, Indiana, who's going to share how some of ERI's programming has supported Zionsville. So Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Savannah, and thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to join Green Umbrella today, and you did a great job with a bit of introduction about my role and work at ERI. And we've got a lot of information to get through in a short time, so you can go ahead and move to the next slide and we'll just keep moving. So first, a bit of background on the Environmental Resilience Institute at IU. We are in our 5th year. This started as part of a grand challenge issued by IU's past president around Indiana University's bicentennial. And our vision is to create an environmental resilience revolution. And what that means to us is a future that is deeply transformed through co-produced knowledge with communities and action that can spur systemic change. Environmental justice is central to our values as we work to ensure an equitable transition to a climate resilient future. And we do this by integrating and leveraging IU research to help communities in Indiana and across the Midwest understand the climatic and environmental changes that are happening and to prepare for those impacts and enhance resilience in their communities. Our programs, especially in the implementation team that I co-manage, are driven by collaboration and pragmatism, especially with measuring and making sure we are informed by the on-the-ground experience and successes of and challenges experienced by our local government partners and other community members. Next slide, please. Within the local government work, I wanted to highlight a few tools before diving deeper on one called the Resilience Cohort, which will be the focus of today's presentation. So we provide a range of resources to help local governments understand the science behind a changing climate, what the impacts are, and to take action. So that first one on the left is the ERI Toolkit. It's been developed in partnership with the US EPA, and it provides tailored information on climate change impacts, adaptation strategies, local government case studies to learn from, and funding opportunities. So while the tool is national in scope with information from EPA, we've added dozens and dozens of Indiana and Midwest case studies and content. And it allows you to tailor your search to issues as diverse and specific as disaster planning and emergency response to algal blooms or indoor air quality. Our monthly webinar series brings researcher experts and local practitioners together to provide training and usable information for local government decision makers, staff, and engaged residents. The Hoosier Resilience Index provides downscaled climate data within the state of Indiana that communicates climate impacts specific to the city and county scale. It includes a mapping feature that addresses land use, floodplain data, and social vulnerability to integrate these climate hazards and vulnerability into a single tool to help local governments communicate and understand their vulnerabilities. And finally, that tool includes a in-depth self-assessment tool called the Readiness Assessment that helps local governments gauge their preparedness and take next steps on preparation. Finally, that Beat the Heat program you see there on the right is a really terrific grant-funded opportunity from the Office of Community and Rural Affairs in Indiana, where we're working on with two communities, Town of Clarksville and City of Richmond, with embedded full-time positions for 2 years in those local governments who are heat relief coordinators, working to help their communities understand and prepare for extreme heat impacts, which is the most significant weather-related cause of death in the United States and a major impact we're facing here in the Midwest. And that graphic there is a temperature sensor on a bike. We took near surface air temperatures all over the city and town multiple times throughout a hot day in August to get really fine grained urban heat island mapping to help inform policy solutions in that space. Next slide, please. But what I want to focus on today is the resilience cohort. So this is really the cornerstone of our success with our local government programming. In this program, we work with a cohort of local governments to measure emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, plan for action, and then implement equitable greenhouse gas reduction strategies and adaptation measures. So along with technical partners, ERI provides support and assistance throughout the program, where local governments can also learn from one another as they work through the program together. In many, though not all cases, local governments are even further supported by a McKinney Climate Fellow. You can see a few of them pictured there on the upper right and lower left. And these are top undergraduate and graduate students who we recruit from Indiana University to lend full-time support in the summer and increase capacity for often resource-constrained governments trying to do the best they can on moving forward with this work. The greenhouse gas inventories are community scale, but they often include a government operations inventory as well. This helps benchmark where emissions are coming from and helps communities understand where the highest impact actions might lie. The action planning is also reflective of the diverse context of our many partners. Some of the plans have been government operations focused with the goal of expanding to community scale over time. Others have had a strong focus on emissions reductions, while still others incorporate substantial adaptation measures. And then finally, that implementations programming, which started initially last year and has been expanded this year, includes modules, again, with a diverse range of mitigation, adaptation programs and policies that you would typically find in a climate plan. So that includes lowering soft costs of solar energy, increasing adoption of electric vehicles, lowering energy consumption in wastewater and water treatment, and expanding equitable access to urban tree canopy to help manage things like urban heat island and stormwater increases in stormwater severity. Next slide, please. So we are now in our 4th year of the Resilience Cohort program, and we continue to evolve as we learn from our partner communities. So that very first year, you can see the numbers. We had 14 communities in 2019 go through stage 1 of the program, that benchmarking emissions, measuring where their greenhouse gases are coming from. We moved on with most of those communities in 2020 rather, to climate action planning. And then in 2021, many of those communities moved on to implementation measures. While the program is sequenced in these stages, actually anybody can jump in on implementation at any time. You don't have to have necessarily a comprehensive climate plan to benefit from increasing uptake of solar energy in your community, of course, or increasing access to the ecosystem benefits of urban trees. So we usually run a few of these programs in parallel now. The really sizable number of those emissions inventories in stage 1, 2021, That was a coordinated regional effort in Northwest Indiana, with about half of those 24 folks coming from up there, counties, cities, towns, who are working together now as a single joint effort to produce a regional climate action plan in Northwestern Indiana, which is fairly new and cutting edge for the US. There's only a handful of these that have been pursued so far in Kansas City area, Metro Washington, DC, Chicago, a few others. So we're really looking forward to that process, which is now underway in the 2022 programming with those local governments. Also wanted to mention that as we've worked to center equity in all aspects of our programming, we've added Spanish translation support for outreach and community engagement, as well as in-depth training and one-on-one equity coaching for all participants in the program. And one other regional effort that I'll mention underway in 2022 is in the Greater Lafayette region. We have the City of Lafayette, City of West Lafayette, and the surrounding Tippecanoe County all working together on multiple joint planning efforts, which is also great to see because, of course, these impacts are often cross-jurisdictional. Regional collaboration and coordination can really help, which is why it's so exciting to hear about Savannah's efforts and plans with the regional focus in the Greater Cincinnati area. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about how it's gone these last few years. We've, of course, had some big challenges along the way with the COVID-19 pandemic, and as governments, of course, and everybody worked to try to stay on top of the needs of their community and respond to that crisis. The climate crisis was continuing to unfold as well, and honestly, it's in some ways just impressive and such a credit to our local government partners that they were able to continue to move forward with this programming despite those challenges. And that meant adapting and figuring out new ways to handle a problem. In 2020, actually, we extended fellowships for the first time from the summer into the fall. So we had folks working remotely with additional support in the fall. We found other ways now to even fund full academic term positions for fellows to really increase that support and capacity. By the numbers there, that's the total number of governments who've committed or measured their greenhouse gas emissions at a community scale. That now covers 46% of the population of Indiana. And we've got some really strong commitments around science-based targets for emissions reductions over the next several decades from our local governments. Of course, while absolutely necessary, benchmarking and planning, the key next steps are implementation, making sure we're pursuing that in an equitable way. And we're in the early stages still of figuring out the best way to do that as an institute and finding new ways to address challenges on that implementation stage. I wanted to speak for just a few moments with regard to capacity and how this work and the resilience cohort helps build capacity in local governments. So first, through our general set of government-facing programs, tools, webinars, we grow community awareness, which Savannah mentioned earlier as a key element of capacity building. Second, we actually directly augment and create that capacity through direct assistance and through the McKinney Climate Fellows program. So we found ways to do that with local governments. And then finally, the work itself helps build the case for increased focus, attention, funding, and dedicated staff for climate action and resilience. So just a few anecdotes on that front. The city of LaPorte, Indiana, joined our greenhouse gas emissions inventory cohort last year. Somebody had recently joined them. Her name is Sarah Nimitz. In fact, it was a project manager hired into the engineering department was tasked with this program. And it quickly became apparent to her and her supervisors and her mayor that she had a real talent for this work and for engagement around these issues. And she is now, in her role, become a sustainability programs manager. We've seen communities like Bloomington and South Bend actually adding second full-time staff members to support the breadth of work they are doing as leaders in Indiana. And then we're seeing growth with sustainability commissions, resident-led volunteer commissions, and other efforts like that can really provide meaningful support and often a bridge to that next step of getting, if not a full-time, dedicated staff member, a half-time position or a quarter-time position, and growing that over time. So it's been really great to see how local governments have interacted with the program and how they've been able to accelerate action based on that. So with that, I'd like to turn it over now to Carol Johnson, who's joining us from the town of Zionsville to share a bit more about their experience with the Resilience Cohort program.
Thanks, Matt. Like you said, my name is Carol Johnson. I work for the mayor in Zionsville. We have been fortunate enough to be a part of the resilience cohort for the past couple of years, and you can see the things we've accomplished with them. We have been incredibly fortunate to have a climate fellow working with us, either full-time or part-time, almost continuously. There have been a couple of months gap, but it's been a huge help for us. Really, the interest in doing climate action planning and greenhouse gas inventory existed when Mayor Siren was inaugurated, but the capacity is just limited in a local government. We have no one full-time person who wholly dedicates their time to sustainability. So having these students come along and work with us, and that being their sole focus, has been absolutely tremendous for us. The technical assistance that ERI provides through all of the different implementation phases that you get to go through have been absolutely phenomenal as well. I've learned so much about EV readiness. We finally got our Soul Smart designation last month, and that was a big, long push for us. So I'm really proud of us for getting that done. There are things that we get to do this year with the urban green infrastructure that our Parks Department and our Department of Public Works wanted to do and have had an interest in doing a tree canopy and an equitable tree planting plan, but it's just time, it's money. That was something that might be done in the next 5 to 10 years or so, but because we get to be a part of this cohort this summer, we're going to get it done this year, and I can't tell you how excited we are for that. I know sometimes as a local government, it can be really hard to start. You want your first climate action plan to be perfect, to be the most impactful, to have the biggest possible footprint it can. But sometimes it's just not possible to have your best plan be your first plan. And I think that can hold some of us back. I think you just need to start with the plan, start with something that is feasible, start with something that gives you a way to open the conversation, and then you review it every few years and you see what else you can do. One of the things I've been really excited we've done here is we have a partnership with Earth Mama Compost, and we have offered our residents curbside composting biweekly. And through this memorandum of understanding, there's no cost to the local government, but all of our residents get half price. So that was just a really easy way for us to offer something for our residents, their own choice to participate, but we did have them pick up 66,000 pounds of compostable waste material from Zionsville last year. So that's something new and something I was really excited to be a part of. Let's see. I think that covers most of it, except that we would really like to see the graduates stay in Indiana. I guess Ohio would be okay too, but we want them to stay in the Midwest. And so developing some capacity in our local governments, I think, is a really fantastic way to ensure that there are positions and there's jobs available for these fantastic graduates when they finish their studies.
Thanks, Carol. What great points. We can go to the final slide. And that's something I really didn't emphasize strongly in this presentation, but is a great outcome from our Climate Fellows program. It's really a workforce development program trying to keep talent and resilience jobs in Indiana. And we've seen that happening. City of Bloomington's Assistant Director for Sustainability was in the first year of the Climate Fellows program. We've got folks who are alumni from that program now as the 2-year heat relief coordinator position in City of Richmond. So it's really great to see that. And the other point that Carol made, which I think is spot on, is it's just important to get started. And we're here to provide that help and support in a tailored way to help folks get going and think, in a more iterative and living way with regard to these plans. The climate action plan shouldn't be something that is completed and then fully implemented over a decadal timescale without revisiting. It should be a living plan, something that we tweak and adjust as we learn more. We're all learning, the whole field is evolving. And to that point, with the resilience cohort programming, every year we change and we grow based on what we're hearing from local governments, what we're learning from our experiences. So what's next for us includes trying to expand this model across the Midwest with partners like Green Umbrella and others who we're in conversation with, making sure we're, again, thinking regionally, coordinating on that regional scale and building support in that way. We're looking to continue to really strengthen capacity on equitable community engagement. That's an area that is often not a strong point for local governments, or we're used to doing things kind of the same old way, and it takes some training and effort to get into communities in different ways to bring in folks who aren't maybe part of the conversation historically and haven't felt embraced or maybe even a lot of trust for their local government. We're trying to bring a stronger focus on risk and vulnerability as well as adaptation planning into the resilience cohort. So we'll have programming around that next year to really make sure we're strongly supporting that side of climate resilience planning. Looking at holistic plan implementation and management. We've done these really great discrete implementation modules around tree canopy, solar energy, EVs, and we'll continue to do that. But we really want to help communities manage their plans in a holistic way too, so that they can not feel overwhelmed and keep an eye on what they've planned to do. Additionally, we're always looking to better integrate our different tools and programs in order to be comprehensive in our support and wraparound services for communities. And finally, really embracing a whole of community approach to climate action and resilience, by which I mean working with nonprofits, with private sector businesses and organizations, with economic development and planning entities. So we're in conversations with the EPA on scoping how we can help enhance public-private collaboration and other things like that to really make sure everyone's involved and it's not local governments on their own. And with that, I guess I'll have that one last thing, which is the McKinney Midwest Climate Project. Thanks to a generous donation from McKinney's, we've been able to unite some of this programming into the under one umbrella and really strengthen and grow what we're doing. So thanks so much for the opportunity to share with you all today. Thank you, Savannah, for having us. And I'm happy to stick around in the next half hour and answer questions too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt and Carol. It's so fun to just hear about what ERI is doing across Indiana and how it will soon expand across the Midwest. I should disclose, I'm so biased towards loving ERI's programs because I did work there for 2 years. And so it's super exciting to see how everything has evolved since I've left. You guys are doing great work. So to that end of talking about potential expansion, one of the fun announcements we have here today is that ERI and Green Umbrella have been in conversations about how can we begin bringing this resilience cohort program outside of Indiana and into Southwest Ohio and Northern Kentucky. And so we've been working out a model and plotting this for a launch for next year. And so I wanted to show what our 10-county footprint is so that you can tell your friends and neighbors and local government leaders that this is something that will soon be coming and available to our region. And so we are working hard to be able to secure funding for that. And a part of that will absolutely come from not only grants, philanthropy, but also donations. Green Umbrella, as a member-based organization, a lot of our programming, can be elevated and expanded due to individual interest and donation. So I just wanted to highlight that and direct you all to, if you are interested or if you think that others in your community might be interested in expanding this program, go to greenumbrella.org/donate. And if you just mark climate policy as your corporation's donation choice and just comment resilience cohort, any funds given there will be dog-eared for the expansion of this program. And I wanted to wrap up with just sharing that we have some additional next steps that we will be announcing here as well. So this Lunch and Learn series is going to be continuing until we launch our regional climate collaborative later this summer. And so we will be hosting additional webinars on energy, housing, our next one later this month, which you'll receive registration details for in the follow-up email for this event, will be about community engagement. So some of those points that Matt and Carol were referring to about how important it is to engage community, we're going to be talking about a model that we've developed here locally with partners such as Groundwork Ohio River Valley, City of Cincinnati, to deeply and equitably engage residents in the climate planning process, and to talk about some of the bigger concepts of what does that look like across a regional scale. I also wanted to highlight that our Midwest Regional Sustainability Summit is on June 16th. So you can go to our website to register for this event. It's going to be really exciting, all about climate preparedness. We have Kristen Baja from the USDN, the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, joining us as our keynote, and there will be plenty of programming connected to how can we expand local capacity. We'll have mayors talking about this. We'll have local government staff talking about this. So please join us. And so to that end, as you all know, if you joined for our first Lunch and Learn series, we are wrapping up the official content here, but we do have an optional Q&A that you all are welcome to stay on for. Matt and Carol will be sticking around to answer any questions. I see that we've gotten some in the chat, but please feel free to contact me. Here's my email. If you have any questions or you want to learn more about the programming that we've talked about today, and these slides and additional resources will be sent in a follow-up email. So you can also always go to our website, greenumbrella.org/climate policy. So with that, I will stop sharing so we can all see each other's faces and begin looking at some questions. And so we have one from Anna, and I love seeing all the enthusiasm too in the chat. And so her question is, how can we get climate fellows in our local governments? Matt, maybe I'll ask you to start with talking about how some of the outreach has happened across Indiana, how Indiana governments connected with ERI and got fellows in their local governments. And then I can take it from there to talk about Ohio and Kentucky.
Sure. And Danny, if you feel like it, feel free to come on camera and share as well. My colleague Danny Schaust is on the call, who co-manages this implementation team and also oversees and runs the Climate Fellows program. If not, no worries either. The Climate Fellows program actually predates the Resilience Cohort program, and it used to be housed in a different unit at IU. It was in the Office of Sustainability. So Danny has worked for 5 or 6 years on that program, working with not only local government partners, but also nonprofit and private sector partners. So we've got a really terrific network built out in that way. The support for local governments in the Resilience Cohort came about more as that we realized that need, for additional capacity when the local governments are trying to take first steps on some of this work. And Danny, if you would like to share a bit more about that, feel free.
Yeah, sure. So this program, as Matt so just generously set up for me, the Climate Fellows program has been around since 2017. We are actually getting ready to start our 6th summer here in Indiana. I've been running this for the past 5 years, so I have a fair number of successes and challenges I can share about setting these kind of programs up. But what we have done in Indiana is we've set up an application process for local governments, businesses, and nonprofit organizations to apply to host. And then once we select those partners, we typically do that in December or January of each calendar year. Then we'll turn around and recruit students to go into those placements we've confirmed. So we have a pretty rigorous selection and application process. We've been very successful in finding good candidates and really cool projects for students to work on. And I'd be happy to talk about more of the logistics about how to actually structure that application, how to supervise students and different things like that. But I'm happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to tell you about the Climate Fellows program. I did drop my email in the chat if you'd like to reach out to me directly about the Climate Fellows program. If not, Savannah and Matt can also connect you with me.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt and Danny. And so great to see Danny. It's been a minute. Yeah, and so with respect to Ohio and Kentucky, as mentioned, ERI and Green Umbrella, we've been working to figure out what that model of an expansion could look like, using Green Umbrella as a regional nonprofit as one example. ERI is also exploring other ways to expand, which is great because we need this everywhere. In my opinion. And so we have sort of updated what it will take to be able to serve individual governments, how much will that cost? And so we've been working on identifying and raising funds to be able to do so. And so following the ERI timeline, where they begin usually recruiting governments in the fall, is when local governments will be able to begin connecting with Green Umbrella. They'll hear announcements about that. Green Umbrella will be the primary contact for Ohio and Kentucky, but we will be working in partnership with Matt and Danny and their team at ERI, and sharing the sort of cohort resources and getting Indiana and Ohio and Kentucky governments talking to each other, because that's a great part about this work is we can all learn from each other. And that is also very much connected to the ethos of launching a regional climate collaborative, is that just hearing what your neighbors are doing is often enough of a catalyst to get local governments to kickstart some action. And similar to what Carol and Matt were saying in their presentation, governments just need to get started. Even just taking one step. I see Dana online with Norwood. They've been doing tremendous work with respect to air quality and sort of informing and mobilizing electeds and government staff. And so having either someone in local government working like Carol or a passionate advocate like Dana, it's just about tapping who is ready to work towards first steps in a community that can really help get local government started. So one of our next questions actually comes from Dana, and this is for Matt. How do you present the bad news about air quality to the municipality? And this is where Keep Norwood Cool, which is an organization that Dana works for, is now.
Thanks, Savannah and Dana. And one follow-up on the McKinney Climate Fellows program, I realized we hadn't mentioned both the Resilience Cohort and the Fellows are not no cost to governments, but it's a very low cost. So we're able to provide that.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah.
Because Kylie, I see Kylie's on the Zoom, and she raised at the budget hearing Monday for the city of Cincinnati, we need more staff in our office, and I can tell you at the county, it'd be great if Hamilton County had an environmental person, but they don't have this capacity, so I think I was really interested in that fellows program, and if Green Umbrella would sponsor some fellows locally.
Yeah, absolutely. We found that when we work with private sector partners, so a typical fellow, graduate student fellow gets paid $6,000 over the summer in the form of a scholarship for 10 weeks of full-time work. We ask private sector partners who are hosting fellows to pay that full amount, but local governments pay substantially less than that. So I think we were asking $2,000 from local governments this year. And then similarly, the Resilience Cohort program is a lot of staff time, technical partner contracts, and other things that we deliver to local governments for in the ballpark of about $1,000 for the whole program, which lasts months, has a lot of training. So I think we found that a no-cost model isn't ideal because we have, we're cobbling together the resources we can to provide that deeper support, but B, you do want we don't want it to be a barrier, but we do want some level of commitment and buy-in from local governments too. So it's striking that right balance. So yeah, with public sector partners, that's been the approach.
We have a tremendous co-op program at our university, the University of Cincinnati. I'm sure Miami does too, but a really great one. And we have so many students who are studying the environment, water quality, air quality. I think it would be super logical for us to try and find a local way to do that. I just think it's really exciting.
That's
so
our
glad
hope.
You mentioned that. Yeah. And sorry, Matt, I was just going to share that. So part of this work that Green Umbrella has been doing this past year is connecting with local university partners. So similar to how Matt described their relationship, the Institute is based within Indiana University. So that is where they've been accessing their students. But we want to be able to tap in and build that local workforce here with University of Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky University, Cincinnati State, et cetera, students here to not only help them imagine what can a climate career look like, what can a local government career look like, but begin building that pipeline to folks in the region. Because as we begin sort of building opportunities, it makes more and more sense for full-time positions to then continue that momentum. So we have gotten tremendous interest from local universities, including UC's co-op program, which I'm glad you mentioned. And with respect to the costs that Danny also just dropped in the chat, we have been working to develop sort of a similar model. So it'd be a similar sort of skin in the game approach for Ohio and Kentucky local governments.
As long as it's affordable. I mean, I just don't, I mean, we can only expect our governments to do so much on this issue. We really are going to be hamstrung. So we need, I think, our environmental partners to chime in too and help support them.
100%.
That's great.
And some of these conversations about, you know, what are the priorities in Ohio and Kentucky? You know, how can this fellowship program kind of support that will be happening through the Regional Climate Collaborative. So we'll be bringing together local governments to hear about their needs, their goals, their barriers, so that we can make sure, you know, we're all working with what our local context is.
Great.
Thanks, Dana.
And then
Sorry,
yes, we are going to get back to Dana's question.
Sorry, my follow-up point got us sidetracked. I think I'd actually pose a question to you just to share a little bit more about what specifically you're talking about and who the bad news is coming from. What types of, like, is it an air quality assessment of some kind, or?
So we are using air beams to measure heat and air quality. And we have a very curious situation in a residential neighborhood where there are two lots which are adjacent to a defunct railroad. And I believe two houses were demolished. So on our innocent little air beam study, every time people walk by, there's an elevation of particulate matter. So I had noticed that when I did it, and then we are just now visualizing our data. And so I said, well, I'd like to know what's there, and can we send a graduate intern over there to measure what's there? And so everybody got very, very nervous. And then, so we have a team, we have a multidisciplinary team. So another member said, well, let's see if it's on any other of maps. And so it turns out it was consistently elevated, whether it was morning or daytime or evening. So I suddenly realized as the community partner that no one wanted to touch this thing. And I thought, so this was supposed to be a legit research project, and we're going to show this to the community. And, you know, I feel like it's my responsibility to go to the safety service director and find out if there's a gas leak or what's going on there. So we're at the point where, you know, my experience as a community partner is, you know, I don't know what the most judicious or productive path for sustaining my project, because if I'm, you know, presenting bad news without any kind of a solution, I'm kind of not going to be around much longer.
That's an interesting question. I and a little bit outside our purview at ERI, this is a little bit more of an environmental quality question, though. Of course, the co-pollutants between greenhouse gas emissions and air pollutants and particulate matter is a very serious and increasingly recognized health issue. I wonder if your state environmental protection agency might have some guidance on next steps and who to be in touch with. As somebody who works in local government also and has some experience there, I would. I think trying to go to decision makers and elected officials or relevant department heads and just say, hey, we're concerned about this. We'd like to work with you to assess and figure out what the issue is so that we can work with experts on solutions is a reasonable approach. It's probably better than what I see sometimes of going straight to calling out the government or, you know, being antagonistic about it, right? Like you're going to potentially alienate or shut folks down before you get the chance to start. So, you know, I think trying to figure out who the right folks are to talk to at the local government, if there's sometimes bringing in research experts can be helpful too. I know we had a lead paint issue with a fire here in Bloomington where I live, and actually our co-director Gabe Filippelli, who's up in Indianapolis, is a lead exposure researcher and expert, and so folks contacted him, and he was really able to quiet some minds around what are the exposures we need to be concerned about. You know, folks want to hear with issues like that, I find, especially from, you know, scientists who are direct experts on those topics. So a few thoughts anyway.
Thank you.
Want to see if there are any other questions for our ERI, Zionsville, or Green Umbrella guests. Feel free to just come off camera, use your voice, or feel free to chat while we wait for that, I might actually throw one out to Carol, because I would love to hear your thoughts. I just think that so many folks, anticipate like, oh, we have to build a sustainability office. We have to have sustainability staff before we do any of this work. And I think Zionsville is a great example of where one of our lead champions is housed within the mayor's office. We'd love to hear a bit more about your thoughts on how do you see Zionsville sort of growing in that respect? Like, what other staff are currently engaged on this work? Do you see opportunity for building in, sustainability specific staff down the road? But yeah, I would just love to hear what you think will happen for Zionsville.
Yeah, that's a great question, Savannah. I think when we started in 2020, we were kind of playing catch up. We were doing our greenhouse gas inventory a little late, but we got it done and kind of caught up that ground from 2019 we had missed. But at that time, it was really being spearheaded by our parks department. And then the mayor said, this is going to be something that's crosses all of our departments. So it's going to come into my office. So tasked me with overseeing our climate fellows and the process. I think for us, it made more sense when your colleague is asking for some information or for some help. It may feel different coming from the mayor's office than from a colleague department. I just think it feels a little different when the mayor's the boss of everybody. So I think, while there's no one person in our town that's dedicated to sustainability, through all of our modules, I've been able to kind of tag different department leaders and different staff. We've had engineers, we've had Department of Public Works. This year we have our recreation manager, maintenance supervisor for parks, who is a certified arborist overseeing our climate fellows. So I'm sort of working with different staff in different departments. The Soul Smart work required our inspectors and our planning department to do some training. So I don't know if, we don't necessarily have to have one person because you really need input from each department. You do need some leadership to say this is important and I want you to dedicate some resources, whether it's time or help with those. Those costs are so reasonable, and that, if we paid to do this green infrastructure tree canopy thing on our own, it just wouldn't happen. So I don't know if in the future if we'll be able to get, a department or a one dedicated staff person. I think that would be really exciting. I think we're laying the groundwork now that the work is valuable and that we're able to work through these different modules and work on our climate action plan. I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where we have a full-time dedicated staff person for this, or if it will be more dispersed with leadership coming from the mayor's office, but just how we got started.
Absolutely. And I think that it's a very viable and exciting approach because, sometimes it's just not an option, or maybe it's not the, I'm seeing Dana's comments about Norwood, maybe it's not the best fit for sort of how the local government has worked. And, I think just showing that there are a lot of different ways to do this work is really important. And then also what I'm hearing from you is that it's becoming a value and a priority amongst many departments, many different types of staff people. And that's the long game, is that, every job is a climate job, and thinking about not only local government work, but all jobs in general, have some connection to drawing down our emissions, improving adaptation, so on and so forth. So thank you for sharing that. Are there any other questions from our remaining audience members? Great. Well, you have all of our emails and you will receive these slides in a follow-up email, as well as registration details for our next webinar in the series. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Matt and Carol, for sharing your insights.
Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure to be here. Great chatting with you.
Thanks for including us. I appreciate it.